On a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a Tuesday. We've got all kinds of things to get into on June 16th. Let us know what's on your mind. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. You can send us a message on Twitch. You can send us a message on the chat function on Spreaker. All kinds of different ways to get in touch, and there's a lot of things to dig into. We'll talk about Bayern Munich. I figured since they're about to win the Bundesliga, I would rock the Bayern Munich top today. Also trying to score points with Johannes, so maybe he'll keep sending us good nuggets on things as Atlanta United comes back. Lots of stuff. Marcus Rashford, we'll talk about him as well. We've got some updates on Zlatan Ibrahimovic potentially being in trouble. Australia has maybe just decided to skip Fox altogether, and Brazil is insane. Those are the topics on the board today. Also, lots of stuff in England as usual. Where do you want to start, John?
Why don't we start with good news this morning and get into Marcus Rashford, because I thought that was a really cool thing, A, with him at the forefront of it, and B, the reversal of the British government.
Well, tell us about it.
Marcus Rashford, here's your headline. Marcus Rashford forces UK government into U-turn over free school meals. And the government has now confirmed it will extend a national voucher scheme to feed children from low-income families following a campaign from Rashford. He wrote to politicians in an open letter on Sunday asking them to rethink the decision to end the national voucher scheme to feed children from low-income families while schools were closed during the coronavirus pandemic. A spokesman for the Department of Education said on Monday the initiative would end as planned at the completion of the school year, but Rashford said he would continue the campaign. The government has now backtracked and announced that it would extend the program, providing an extra £120 million in funding. Rashford had already helped raise more than £20 million for the food distribution charity Fair Share during the coronavirus outbreak. In a tweet, Rashford said, "I don't even know what to say. Just look at what we can do when we come together. This," in all caps, "is England in 2020. So I completely agree with your show note that Rashford should be the new prime minister.
It's awesome that he's using his platform for good. This is an issue here in the United States as well. Whenever school's not in session, kids who are reliant on any kind of a school lunch program might not have an option at home. This is something that before I worked for Soccer in the Streets, I didn't really know much about. I was lucky that that wasn't an issue for me as a kid, and I didn't really see it as an issue as a kid. I don't know if my elementary school at the time had a program. I just didn't see it. I was a kid. I wasn't paying attention. But when I started coaching kids with Soccer in the Streets, and we'd have, for example, a 9 a.m. game on a Saturday, and we would have trained really good all week, and everybody was up for it, and then we get to the game, and the first half it's just sluggish. And halftime you start talking to the kids, and it's like, there was no breakfast. We didn't have anything to eat today. There was nothing in the house. We didn't have anything. Or it was, like whatever sugary thing you could find. I mean, it was just not really many options here. And it was something that, Soccer in the Streets has done really good work right now with making sure that kids are getting lunches. They're working with some other charitable partners in the Atlanta area to do this at the moment. It's a key issue, and it's one that often gets overlooked because, if they're getting lunch in school, you don't think about it, well, school's not in. And when school's not in due to a global pandemic, that's a long time that these kids are potentially not going to be able to eat on a regular basis. And Marcus Rashford to zero in on this and keep going with it. This is not an easy thing to accomplish because I believe it was yesterday the government was like, no, we're not going to continue with this. we'll figure it out when we get there, all the usual rhetoric, yada, yada. But they had to reverse face. And the only reason they did is because Marcus Rashford didn't stop. He didn't shut up about it. He didn't just, go on to another cause. He kept fighting for these kids. And, I mean, that's what it is. You're trying to make sure kids are fed. Like, that's the most basic of basic. And for Rashford to continue and continue and continue to lobby, it's really impressive. And he's a leader among players in the Premier League, and we need more Marcus Rashfords. This is why I think sports are so important. Because if Marcus Rashford was an employee at a company, if he was a vice president of a company, if he worked somewhere in a retail operation, whatever, he wouldn't have the same voice that he does. But the fact that he is a star player and a footballer and has used that voice for positivity, it's impressive. This is why I think it's important for sports to come back. People will cite all the different reasons. It's a distraction from what's going on. Sure. It's the economics of it, which, yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely valid. But things like this are very important too. And the more that Marcus Rashford is able to play and the more that he is in the limelight for playing, the louder his voice can be for good and for positive social change. So this is incredibly impressive. I can't tell you how much respect I have for Marcus Rashford to do this and to not stop and to keep fighting and to win this for these kids who need to guarantee meals, because who knows what school's going to look like in the fall? Who knows what, not even just school in the fall right now. Like, I think it was supposed to end at the end of this month, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in July, they weren't going to magically have meals for these kids. So, I mean, you were looking a couple weeks away from these kids not knowing where their next meal might be. And Marcus Rashford didn't stop fighting for him. So, absolutely all the props that you can find for Marcus Rashford.
What is 15 pounds these days in the exchange rate? Do you know off the top of your head?
Let's see. I want to say around $20, but let me make sure.
Because that's what we're talking about here.
Well, yes, but we're talking about it across a pretty wide scale, about $19.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's not cheap.
No.
It's not an easy thing for the government, who's losing a bunch of money, to be able to deal with. Look, that's real. And Rashford said it, and I think the way he said it is what opened up a lot of eyes. The conversation that the British government has had, and I think it's the conversation most governments have had during this, they're going to pull out all the stops to keep the country moving along. They're going to do whatever it takes to keep things going. Well, this is part of that. This should not be pushed to the side. There are things that are less important than making sure kids get to eat on a regular basis. It's $19 a day. It's not like these kids are eating steaks every day. They're eating to keep going. It is the basic of the basic, and it's a necessity. And especially when you're not in school and you don't have access to meals, they have to figure this out. And what I love is that Rashford has continued to fight on this. He's continued to push, but he's bringing other people into that fight. Other people have joined him. Other people have made donations. Other organizations have stepped up their efforts to make sure that kids in their area, their circle of influence, are able to be okay. And that's what's important here, is he has shined a light on something that doesn't get talked about enough. It doesn't get talked about in this country enough, and it's absolutely a reality in this country. When we would look at programs and schools to partner with soccer in the streets, we looked at schools that had at least 70% free or reduced lunch. And many of the schools that we did soccer programs in had 99% of the kids on free or reduced lunch. It's a program that the federal government has, and I think states support it as well. But the question always comes up is what happens in the summer. And the question had to come up, and there are a number of different agencies who are working really hard to answer it right now. But when you're out of school from, late March? I don't remember when schools all went out, but sometime around late March through the end of the school year, that's a long time. And then you're into the summer months where it was already a question, and there were some other programs that could help, but they were probably already stretched. The issues that Marcus Rashford is pointing at in the UK are real here in this country as well, and it's something that has to be talked about and addressed. And it's good to see Atlanta United work on this. It's good to see the West Side Fund work on this. It's good to see Soccer in the Streets work on this. That's very local, and that's what they can control. I don't know what the national conversation is. I don't know what's going on around this, but it's absolutely real. It's the reality of these kids not being in school. I think we've all talked about the educational side, but the food is a huge element here, and that's a huge element of why being back in school is so important, because it's a distribution point for meals for kids who might not have them otherwise.
Yeah, and so I saw that obviously coming over the last couple of days and wanted to start the show off with some good news this morning.
The last day Badgermon taught was face-to-face was March 13th. So If you're going from March 13th through whatever the last day of school was set to be, and I don't even remember at this point, you're a couple months, easy. Yeah. And then the summer, which was already going to be stretched because it always is. Mm-hmm. That's where we're at. Kudos to Marcus Rashford. And I want to see how the U.S. is handling this conversation as well. It's what we know here in Atlanta is great, and there's a lot of people working on it, but what about Charlotte? What about Nashville? What about Jacksonville, Florida? We talk about cities. What about, Macon, Georgia? What about Statesboro, Georgia? What about small places like that, too? Because the need's still there.
And I think that it's amplified even more so in smaller towns, because you're talking about folks who aren't making as much money per capita in the first place. And then you have rural communities and rural kids in these one school counties where you're having to travel, more than just, walking a half a mile to school, and all these other external factors that lead into it. You're tied to your family's business there in the corner of the county, and you've got to hop on a bus and go 30 minutes to school every day both ways. So, no, it's a great point about smaller communities specifically, and how it's impacting and how it should be addressed in the rural communities too.
Yeah, it's something that any program that works with youth, it can get lost in the shuffle. It's absolutely an element of it, and it's something you have to consider. I mean, just me, when I was coaching, I had to consider it and plan on, okay, we have morning matches, part of my coaching bag has to be granola bars, has to be something that I could afford to just go buy and bring. So guys who needed a little boost, guys who didn't have breakfast, would be able to perform better because they wanted to perform well. And just the basics of that. You always had to think about when we had away games and we would drive, because we were the classic season we did, the first one that I coached, we were drawn into a group that had us go into Columbus, had us go into Macon, had us go into Dublin. We went up to Dahlonega. I think that was it. I think those were the long trips. And when you're talking about a team with, parents are working 2 and 3 jobs, they can't drive the kids to the game. These are, teenagers. We were a U19 team that had kids from 13 to 18 on it. And luckily, one of the guys drove a car, and I drove a car, and Ashley drove a car, and we packed the cars and drove. But we also had to plan as part of that, making sure that we had stops for meals, and we would generally try to do it on the way and on the way back, because again, it was a time we knew that we could help make that happen. And every time there would be, a couple of kids who wouldn't have, extra money or wouldn't have money to get something they needed, and, you'd chip in and you'd help. I mean, if you coach in these situations, if you're a teacher in these situations, if you do any kind of, youth programming in these kinds of situations, you start to realize that that's a huge element of this. So for Rashford, who is a professional player who could be focusing on anything he wanted to be able to take the time and do this so well. It's not even just that he took the time. He was so impactful with the way he did it. It's incredibly impressive. So, I have a ton of respect for the work that he's put in, and to be able to pull, this much money out of the government to get this done. I mean, it's a lot of money, and it was something that, just could not go by the wayside. I mean, he's helped raise on his own £20 million for a charity called Fair Share during the outbreak. And now to lobby the government to get £120 million in funding to extend this program, it's a huge thing. So good for him to use that platform for good for kids who don't have that voice. Rashford spoke up for them. It was awesome.
All right. We have a title that could be decided today, correct?
Yes, we do. In Germany, it's down to Bayern Munich. If they win, they clinch it. And they should win. They're playing Werder Bremen, who is trying not to get relegated. So It should be Bayern's title, which not exactly a surprise. The question's going to be down the road. And this is something that we wondered about coming into this. Coming into the season, let's go back to last fall. You looked at Bayern, and you had Dortmund, who was looking like they might be a contender. RB Leipzig was trying to push higher than they'd ever pushed before. It's like, well, maybe you're going to have a title race in Germany this time. Italy, Juve's won it over and over and over again. Well, Inter took the lead for a while. Lazio has really pushed hard. Maybe you're going to have a title race there. Spain, it's Barcelona, it's Real Madrid. Every once in a while, Atleti steps up. Yeah, it's Barcelona and Real Madrid. Mm-hmm. France, it's PSG. It's always PSG right now. It's still PSG. The question for me is, coming out the other side of this, is it going to equalize things, or is it just going to create more separation? And I worry about the latter. I worry that it's just going to separate the haves and the have-nots even more. The couple of things that give me that impression is Bayern. The rumors out there about Bayern are that they're going to have plenty of money to spend in the upcoming window, and money's not really going to be an object for whoever they want. Real Madrid has already talked about their financials, and they managed it really well. This is not a knock on Real Madrid. They've managed the situation really well to the point that they are going to come out of it on the other side. PSG, I don't think, is going to be dramatically hurt by this. Juve should be fine. And when you look at some of the other clubs that were pushing to contend, well, Timo Werner's going to be gone. He's going to go, and he might not even play for them in the Champions League the rest of the season. That's the news coming out of Europe this morning, is that if tomorrow UEFA makes this a done deal, and it's the quarterfinal, semifinal, final, all being played in Lisbon, one game to finish out the European seasons. That would be in August, after everything else is done. Well, the reports are that Timo Werner would go ahead and go to Chelsea in July, and he would take a break in August and rest and be ready for the next season. He would not finish the Champions League campaign for Leipzig. That's not a good situation. I don't know what they could really do about it, because the windows and everything are all out of whack. Everything is a mess right now. It's a bad situation. But that's going to hurt RB Leipzig in the long run. Is Dortmund going to be able to hold on to Jadon Sancho? Don't know. Lots of suitors are circling right now. So is he going to stick around? If he leaves, are they going to be able to just reload? Bayern's not going to have that problem. So does that lead get even further? In Spain, I mean, it could be Real Madrid by themselves going forward, because Barcelona's in a world of hurt financially. France, I don't see anything changing with PSG. Italy, maybe a little more of a question because you've seen Inter and Lazio challenge more this season than we've ever seen, but can they hold up to that? And if you even take it a step further and you talk about the gaps in the groups, the elite group versus the next group, I think that's where you start to see the big separation. I think you see maybe not one team away from everybody in every country, but definitely the lead pack away from the rest of the group. It's not a good thing. It's not, and there's really not much that can be done about it because FIFA can talk about salary caps and all that all they want. You can't do that in every country. It's not going to work that way. So you can't do it in one country and then have others not do it. You know, I mean, La Liga's somewhat financial fair play salary cap thing hasn't restricted Madrid from doing what they've done lately. It's somewhat restrictive, but it's more about clubs being responsible financially than trying to create parity. It has a different goal. To create parity, you're going to have to go into something like a salary cap, and it's never going to happen. So this is a big question for European football, and it's been one that's been coming, and it's why people have talked about a Super League. It's why these big clubs have talked about an extended Champions League to play more games against bigger teams because, look, they're not being challenged. England is a little different. But we've seen the last couple years, Liverpool and Manchester City start to edge away from the rest of the pack. I don't think that changes here. It looks like Chelsea's going to have the ability to spend with them, at least in the short term. Tottenham's not. I don't know about Manchester United. It sounds like they will because they're talking about spending a good bit. But just because you can spend doesn't mean you get it right. And as we've seen this with teams as well. But they'll have the opportunity to. Tottenham won't. Leicester won't. You know, the rest of the pack, I don't see Arsenal spending like that. I just don't see it. So you're looking at Liverpool and Manchester City cut above. Maybe Chelsea gets into that. We'll find out if they get their signings right. And the ones they're talking about, hey, it could be enough. Madrid, cut above. PSG, cut above. Bayern, cut above. Juve, I think they're still going to be a cut above. I don't know if Inter or Lazio join them. I don't think so. Is that good for the game? I don't know if it is. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done about it. I think this coronavirus outbreak is just going to accentuate it even more. It was already heading that way. This is just going to make it worse.
And I think at the same time, and hear me out, and I want your opinion on this, when you're talking about financials in a marketplace like we're going to experience here, where players are going to be on the market and teams are not going to be getting what they would normally be getting, and I'm going to put that in quotation marks, because of where the marketplace is. Mm-hmm. I would think that the teams that are the quote-unquote haves and will be spending money will be able to stock up their rosters even more so because of the depressed marketplace. Instead of spending, $100 million on a guy, you're spending $75 million on a guy, which gives you $25 million to spend on someone else that you wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity to spend on in the first place. So I think that it gives these teams that have these coffers the chance to stock and stack their rosters even more than they would have had the chance to.
Yeah, no, it just accentuates it because it eliminates some of the competition. Because the teams that were trying to step up and push in the same way and didn't have the financial means to compete with the elite, but they had to get everything right. And you see it sometimes. I mean, Leicester's season, they got everything right. When clubs step up and challenge these heavyweights, sometimes they nail it with the right signing, the right player coming through the academy, the right group. Can they maintain it? That's where Liverpool has shown their financial might. They've spent on transfer fees, don't get me wrong, but where they've shown it is they've been able to keep players because they can pay them big salaries to hold on to them. That's been key. Clubs like a Leicester can't do that. Clubs like even an Atletico Madrid can't do that. They can't keep those players. RB Leipzig, right now, we're seeing it. Timo Werner is going to go for a huge amount of money. They can't pay him the same amount. They can't do it. So they're going to have to let him go and then reload. The elite have the money not just to go recruit the top talent, but then to keep them if they want to. That's the difference. And that's what separates the top clubs from a strength standpoint and the rest of the pack. And I think that gap's going to be even bigger now. I don't see any way that it's not bigger now because of all this. So it's something to keep an eye on. You want to see title races. You want to see what we saw last year in England with Liverpool and Manchester City. I'm trying to think of title races in Italy and Germany and France to talk about, and there just isn't any. Not in the last decade. In Spain, we could have a really good one between Madrid and Barcelona this year. Barcelona will hang around as long as Lionel Messi is still impactful, and doesn't look like that's going away anytime soon. But after that, I don't know what Barcelona looks like. I don't know if Barcelona will be the Barcelona that we know, because they've got to, while they have Messi, find a way to fix these financials. And the problem is they've done what, I think of what the Braves did towards the end of Bobby Cox's run, what the Saints have done for a long time. Teams that are trying to hold on, and they have you have incredible talents that you're trying to hold on for to get them another title, to get one more championship. It was the whole conversation going into the last year of the Bulls three-peat, the second three-peat. And Jerry Krause wanted to move on from it 2 years in. He didn't want to come back and go for the second three-peat. He wanted to move on from Scottie Pippen. He wanted to move on from other players. He wanted to rebuild. If you don't do it at the right time and you don't do it effectively, well, what have the Bulls done since then?
Nothing.
The Braves went into the tank for a while because they kept mortgaging the future to try to hold on and win another division and win another division. It's a tough balance. It's a really tough balance, and generally you see, as we saw with The Last Dance, Jerry Krause got ripped for that idea. He got ripped from the players, which I understand. He got ripped because he wanted to blow up something that was successful. But he knew that if he didn't do it when those players had one more year of value. Some of the potential trades that have been discussed that were rumored at the time, for Scottie Pippen, for example, were pretty wild. And maybe could have set the Bulls up for not just one more title, but maybe a couple of them. Maybe that would have been the bridge towards the end of Michael Jordan's career, to be able to get more and not fall off like they did. That's the hard part here. Barcelona's been doing that, essentially. They kept paying Xavi. They kept paying Iniesta large amounts to stay. They're doing it with Busquets. They're doing it with Piqué. Lionel Messi, you pay the man whatever he wants and you keep him in your shirt. That's a different conversation. Just like Jordan, as long as you could keep him in that shirt and playing, you do. The rest of it, you got to think long term. And now Barcelona has spent themselves into a point, and it's been exacerbated by a global pandemic that they didn't see coming. But now they've lost a ton of revenue. They've been spending so much on salary, they can't really get out of it except for what they've done and get pay cuts from the players, which has helped. But you've got contracts that you got to deal with. And now, the talk about them going to get Lautaro Martinez, which was a little shaky before, is now kind of like, well, how are you going to pull that off? Where is that money going to come from? Because I don't think you're going to move Coutinho for a ton of money. Are you going to move somebody else for a ton of money? I don't know. I don't know how they pull this stuff off. I just don't. And it's because they've tried to just hang on. And now they're to the point that unless they go get somebody like an Mbappe, which has not been rumored, and I don't think it could even happen now. When Messi goes, Barca's in huge trouble. Ooh. Huge trouble. Because even if you go get Lautaro Martinez, great player, he's not Lionel Messi. He's not that kind of figure. I think, honestly, the only player that could be that is Mbappe right now.
Yeah.
that could be that kind of figure. I don't think Neymar's that either. I wouldn't touch it. But I just don't see it. I don't think they can get Mbappe. Mbappe's got to go somewhere else, by the way. And this is starting to come up a little bit more in the conversation about him. He's got to go be challenged more. He's not developing in France. He's got to go to a top club. Don't know who that's going to be. Don't know where it's going to be. Don't know when that's going to happen. But for his development, it needs to happen. Barca has to figure this out this window because they might be able to put themselves on the right kind of track, maybe over a couple of windows. But they're at that point that if Lionel Messi does an Achilles and he's done for them for 2 years, maybe for good, I don't know what Barcelona is after that. I really don't think they're going to be anything more than upper mid-table. And that's a huge concern for a club that big and that powerful that is walking on the tightrope.
Did you see, you mentioned PSG, did you see the Javier Pastore interview in Football Italia?
I did not. What did Javier Pastore have to say?
He said, and it goes to PSG and their struggles in the Champions League, he says, in the French league in recent years, they've been superior to all the other teams. Many times, the games were over at halftime and the pace drops for the rest of the match. That's what's missing in the Champions League games, where you can't stop for a second. It happens because in France, they play against teams that require limited effort.
Yeah, you're just not being tested on a regular basis. I mean, for all the talk about U.S. men's national team players and MLS, I think some people try to tell you that the games don't mean anything in MLS. I disagree with that now. I think the level is really good. You're going to be tested pretty much week in and week out. Even when you play lesser teams, it's not that big of a gap. And when you talk about a U.S. national team player, you know, unless you are Gio Reyna and what he is doing, unless you're Weston McKennie and what he's doing, and even Christian Pulisic, but he's at a different level of a club, but he's not playing consistently. So he's not getting that pressure, that feeling. You need that to develop. You need that to understand how to handle those pressure moments. That's why I've always felt like U.S. players have struggled in the pressure-packed moments, whether it's at a World Cup, whether it's at the Estadio Azteca against Mexico, because they don't see it regularly. Because even the guys who go to Europe struggle in that because so many of them went to a club and aren't playing regularly. You've got to be tested on a regular basis. PSG's not. The French league's not good enough. So they can go spend whatever they want to spend, and players aren't basically being prepared to win a Champions League because they're not facing that kind of competition outside of the Champions League. Nobody's pushing them in France. Kefsi chimes in on Twitch about Serie A. He says, long-term, it's always been difficult for Serie A to keep pace with Juve. The financial pushes clubs make to compete usually cause sales of key players and frequently to Juventus itself, which is true. It's been, and Nick Alifi would probably have to chime in on this, Milan, when they were powerful, had the financial backing, and were able to maintain it over a long period of time. They fell off when they lost the financial backing. Nobody else has been able to consistently have that level of financial backing. You had Inter's treble under Mourinho in 2010. You had the Milan teams of the previous decade. Since then, it's been all Juventus. And are they going to come back to the pack, or is money going to come into an Inter to be able to step up? They got to spend it right, too. It's not just the money showing up. You've got to find out how to spend it. Is it going to be an Inter? Is it going to be a Lazio? Roma looked like it could be that team, but then they pretty much blew most of their Champions League money that they got last year, and their financials are bad. Is Milan ever going to find a way to do this and find the money to be able to do it? Is it somebody else? I don't know. I don't know. It's tough. You don't really see anything on the horizon for more competition in a lot of leagues in Europe. And I don't think that's good for the game. You can point at promotion relegation. You can point at the level and say, well, this is better than whatever. It's better than Liga MX. It's better than MLS. It's better than Argentina. You can point to all that, but the league is not compelling. It's just not. The only compelling stories come from the relegation fight. They come from maybe who gets into Europe. So many teams are just in the middle and stuck in the middle, and they're not moving from the middle. And it's like you can pretty much lock them into 10th place every year. They might be 8th, they might be 12th, but you can lock them into the middle every single year. I don't get the appeal of that. I don't. I'd much rather watch a league where things can happen that are unexpected. I mean, MLS, you have the salary cap, which is part of it, but you also have the playoffs, which creates another level of chaos. Liga MX, same thing. You see like what happened last time around where the top seeds got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Big upsets, all 4 of them. And you had a wild playoff. It got everybody's attention. Argentina, with the way that their format was with short leagues, you had different winners all the time. I mean, we had the title race with Racing and Defensa Justicia not that long ago. Like, those things are compelling. They're interesting. They get you excited. And if you go in, I mean, all right, go ahead and go to the bookie now, because the favorite in Italy is going to be Juventus for the next season. The favorite in Germany is going to be Bayern. The favorite in France is going to be PSG. Lock it in. Like, go ahead. It's going to be one of those bets. And I think Taylor Twellman was talking about it on a game. I want to say it was the Saarbrücken game, the German Cup match, where who was it who played? Was it Dortmund? No, it was Leverkusen who played Saarbrücken, if I remember correctly. You had to bet like $1 million to win 160,000. It's the odds are going to be crazy like that, but would you think about that if you had $1 million to blow for Bayern or PSG or Juve? Yeah, because it's pretty much a guarantee. I mean, it just is. It's that's where we're at. That's not good. It's not a good place to be. I think it's only going to get worse.
Well, and you mentioned what was the flavor that we assigned Crystal Palace? Was it beige?
Well, it's a color. It's not a flavor, John. I don't know what beige tastes like.
But what it was? Did we give them beige? Did we color them beige?
Yes.
Okay. So just the intrinsic value of being beige. I mean, would you be interested in a beige house?
Well, it depends. I mean,
depends on the accents, I guess.
Well, no, you're combining a couple different things here. Would you want a hot pink house? Probably not. It's a house color. It's not a team color. Crystal Palace is boring. Being a Crystal Palace fan has to be boring. It's what are you looking forward to every year?
Mid-table at best. Bunch of 1-1 draws.
Looking forward to that. No, I'm saying, like, what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about going into the season? Maybe a cup run?
Yeah.
Maybe an upset here or there? Maybe a young player coming through and watching them develop?
Cheerleaders?
I don't know. I haven't seen their cheerleaders. I don't know if you're looking forward to that or not.
I don't either.
It's just, I don't know. I don't know what your excitement is going into the season. But that's how it is, and it's only going to get worse. It's only going to separate further, and we'll just have to see what UEFA, what these leagues, what FIFA could do about it, if anything. I think what's going to happen in response to it is some kind of a Super League or an expanded Champions League to where you're going to play 10 to 12 group stage games. That's probably the compromise. The Super League, where teams are pulling out of their domestic league, I don't see happening probably ever unless the domestic leagues crumble on their own because of something like this or something else. I don't see that happening. But could you see a combination where teams basically have to have 2 squads to a degree and play 10 to 12 Champions League games in the group stage and then go into the knockout? Yeah, I think that's the compromise because that's where more money is, that's where more competition is. For those elite clubs, that's what they're going to want.
Uh-oh.
David Amoyle tweets out that the Italian Federation has announced the dates for the next 2 transfer windows in Serie A. They're not doing the 12-week one. Italy is doing September 1 to October 5th for their next window, and then pretty traditional, January 4 through February 1 of 2021. Every country will come up with their own. So the question that is already starting to come up is, what about players whose contracts end June 30th? They can't join a new team till September 1st. Is there going to be some in between? We've seen some countries do a domestic window that opens up. Would Italy look at that? We'll see. But that's your transfer windows, and you're taking what is normally about a 12-week window at the end of the previous season up to the start of the next season, or for some countries even into the next season. You're taking 12 weeks and condensing it to 4. So all the madness of summer silly season in Italy is going to be condensed into 4 weeks of chaos. And add the chaos of teams that have to sell players to balance the books, and teams that then have to find money to sign players to function, to have a coherent team on the field. And then other teams who are just picking who they want and picking off whatever they want. So it's going to be nuts. September 1st to October 5th, that's the window in Serie A this year. And then the next one is traditional. It's January, essentially.
I've got a couple of folks who chimed in on Twitter this morning.
What do we have on the Twitters?
Tafka completely agrees with you.
Okay.
Tafka says, I don't find any of the European leagues intriguing because the table and the fixtures getting there is so, quote, predestined, end quote. It's why I love MLS so, with 3 O's, much. It's the only thing I look forward to is watching Dortmund create class youth players.
Yeah, it's just, I've found it myself. I mean, obviously, I have a work interest in following MLS closely and USL Championship closely, so I'm watching games there. Not even just the next opponent or the opponent a couple games down the road. Like, I'm just going to watch whatever game is on. MLS first, and in USL Championship, I'm going to watch whoever Atlanta United 2 is playing next, and then if there's a compelling game, I'm going to watch it. Outside of that, I watch more of Argentina than probably any other country because it's an interesting league because it has superpowers. I mean, you have Boca and River, and they are huge. And you have a next tier of a Racing and an Independiente that are big clubs. But you see smaller clubs pop up and win games. And you also have a really challenging calendar for even those top teams because they've got to fight on multiple fronts with the Copa Libertadores or Copa Sudamericana going on. And that pulls teams away, and that creates openings in league play. It's why River, as good as they've been, and as many Libertadores as they've won in the last 4 or 5 years, they haven't won a league. They haven't won the league trophy. And that's what makes Argentina so interesting, and I've really enjoyed it. Mexico, the playoffs. I watch the Mexican playoffs pretty consistently because it's absolute chaos. I'll watch the big games in Mexico. I'll watch the big games in Europe with certain teams that I like the way they play, or there's a player that there's a connection to. Like, I watched more Newcastle than I'd ever watched before because of Miguel Almiron going there. I'll watch things here and there, but in general, I'm watching competitions that I find more compelling. So that's me, though. I didn't grow up, I didn't grow up as a Crystal Palace fan. I don't have generation after generation of my family as Crystal Palace fans, and you feel that pull. If you're a Mississippi State fan, for example, it's like you have generations and generations of history, or you went there, or there's some personal connection. Mississippi State is what Mississippi State is, but even occasionally they pop up and do something that surprises you. Crystal Palace doesn't. It's just they are who they are. And we're using Crystal Palace as the basic 10th team in every league. Like, that's just the name we're using here. There's one in every country. That team that's not really at threat of getting relegated 9 times out of 10. Not in any real threat to get into European competition 9 times out of 10. They're just right there in the middle, and there's just not much to play for or look forward to every year.
For me, though, I'm that guy who will watch pretty much anything in front of me.
Why? But why don't you pick? Why don't you? This is what I've never understood. Yeah, I mean, on a normal weekend, and what's going to come up here, where you're going to have games from England, you're going to have games from Spain, you're going to have games from Germany. There's choices.
Mm-hmm.
So why? What pushes you to make those choices?
Well, first and foremost, with the Premier League, for me, it's obviously MLS, USL Championship, USL League One. That's first and foremost because that's part of the job. Premier League, because before I got into MLS, I watched the Premier League. And I think that my ties to being a part of the Swans Trust was where that came in. When Swansea made their big push, got into the Premier League, stayed, defied all the odds, made it difficult for folks. So that was where I guess my interest in English football came, was from my investment literally in these teams, whether it was Swansea or Wimbledon or Portsmouth or Scunthorpe, and we talked about Scunthorpe yesterday. So I guess my financial investment and the idea that I was a part of something was where my interest in the Premier League stemmed from. But much like you watch South American football, I will watch Costa Rican football because of Atlanta United and who they played in CONCACAF Champions League. So what that does is it gives me the window to watch Central American football and see the teams that might be a part of CONCACAF Champions League. I'll watch Liga MX for the same reason, but I will watch pretty much any Liga MX game because I like how it's presented on television. Germany, for me, because of what they presented during the pandemic, I've watched more Bundesliga now than I have in the past because of the fact that it's a live event and they're doing a fantastic job, in my view, of putting the product out there. But after that, I don't watch Ligue 1 because there's no competition there. It's PSG and everybody else. I'll watch Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, but that's about it for La Liga. Maybe the relegation fight at the end of the year to see who's up and down. But that's about it for me. I mean, I'll watch a lot of different things, I guess, because of the centralized notion of, there's a couple of steps removed from an Atlanta United relationship. But I will say that because of that, my view has expanded into Central America more than I've ever thought of before.
I'm not talking about big games or important games that pop up. Like if I'm talking about an average match, I'm going to watch MLS more than anything else. I'm going to watch probably Argentina next. USL Championship. Actually, this past season, I've watched a good bit of Serie A. I ended up turning on a Saturday where it was a choice between Bundesliga in the morning or Serie A in the morning or Premier League in the morning. A lot of times it ended up being Serie A for me. And then once you got into the noon or 1 o'clock, that's where games were kicking off in Argentina, and I would go to Fanatis and watch there. So, I'm not talking about like Champions League or Libertadores or a big game that is going to pull you in no matter where if you know the storyline. Just on average, that's probably where I was this past year, was MLS first, Argentina second, USL Championship third, and Italy fourth, because even past Juventus, I didn't really care about Juve, but it was the other teams that were more evenly matched that were pretty interesting. And you had some interesting things going on tactically in Italy, too, and that was appealing to me. So, not just me. I mean, it's not right or wrong. It's all about taste and what you like and what kind of styles you like or who you grew up with or a player that might pull you in. And like I said, Newcastle became if they were playing in that 10 o'clock game, a lot of times I'd watch them instead of Serie A because I wanted to see how Miguel was doing. Yeah, that'll happen too. It'll evolve, but the competitions have to be more compelling. And my question, and I think they're going to be too stubborn to do it, But my question, because there's only so much you can do about a salary cap, there's only so much you can do about these teams that have a ton of money. What do you do to make the league more compelling or the championship more compelling? A playoff would be the answer.
Yeah.
Never going to happen. They're not going to do it. Germany has floated it a few times, and it's come up, hasn't gone anywhere. England, people would lose their minds. I mean, people would just start screaming and hollering about how stupid it is. But, you know, a lot of those people would be fans of the team in 10th place that has nothing to play for every year, and they just don't want to change because it's always been a certain way. Yeah. But look at baseball. Baseball has, over the years, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the National League Championship Series, the American League Championship Series, and the World Series, and that's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's all you had. You had 4 teams that made the postseason, and they kept expanding it because people were losing interest. They've got their own problems that are a lot bigger than playoffs. Other leagues in Europe, I think, could benefit from it, but they won't do it. They won't do it because of this aversion to it, because they don't see it as authentic or legit or any of that. I think it is. I think the playoffs, for me, MLS playoffs, most compelling games every year. Every year, those are the games that I remember. Not just in an MLS campaign, but just in general. Those are the games I remember. We saw it with Liga MX this past year. You know, there's been a ton of Liga MX playoff games over the years that you think back to and were really wild and interesting and they're memorable. I don't really think back to remember a whole lot of, you know, random league games for a team that wins the league by 20 points. You know, It's just, you don't really remember much about that season.
Nope.
What else we got?
Nathan Pugh is in this morning, and a couple of things from Nathan. He says he'd take Coutinho back for a bunch of Outback gift cards. He's not sure how that helps Barca, though.
That's about all you're going to be able to get. Outback gift cards, or, I don't know, maybe you can find a nice restaurant
Newcastle
to buy a gift certificate for.
Yeah.
Newcastle, that's not happening, John. It's not going to get done. I mean, now you're even getting to the point that it looks like some other friend of the owners of Manchester City were helping this bid along. Yeah. And now there's questions coming up about Amanda Stavely and previous things with businesses that she's been involved in questions. It's getting a step beyond even the piracy issue. But one thing in an article that I read that jumped out to me, from what most people know, the Premier League has never denied a purchase if the owners had the money to make it happen.
Yeah.
It was always about the money. Are they going to deny this one? Because this is one where you've got it from the WTO that Saudi Arabia was involved in pirating games that you sold the rights to another company. They were cutting into the value of your product, and now they want to buy into your league. Are you going to let them? It's beyond the human rights questions. It's beyond Amanda Stavely's business questions. It's beyond all of it. You want to buy into the product that you were pirating a few months ago.
Yeah.
I'm not selling it to you.
No.
But we'll see what they do. The Premier League's in a really tough spot because there's no precedent. They've never said no before.
And then, what does the PIF think about other investments? Do any of the other Middle Eastern entities that might be interested in the future turn their interest elsewhere if this one gets turned down? It's an interesting domino. Also, Nathan says, happy birthday to Klopp. I did not know this.
Oh, I did not know it was Jurgen Klopp's birthday.
Well, mazel tov.
I'm sure he will have some very clever things to say in an interview. He's a clever man, Jurgen Klopp.
And Nathan also says it was glad to have the Soccer Over There gang back together last night.
Yeah, that was bonkers. There was Nicholas Bentner talk. There was a player who used the excuse in Chile that he was late for training because he was abducted by aliens.
Oh, and his teammates had his back, too.
Well, no, his teammate said that, yeah, he's not a player who would make something up. There has to be something to it. And then he came out and he's like,
and then he said,
I
made it up.
Late for training. I made that
up. I made it up. I did.
So that was a fun one last night, and just other general hijinks and shenanigans. So if you missed that last night, it's available on the app. It's available. You can also go back and watch it on Twitch. Now that we figured out the new setup in the studio here to run things. So sorry about yesterday with Twitch, y'all. I apologize.
And then his 1B, Nathan's, he says, the pettiness of Scottish footy is admirable and entertaining.
It's stupid is what it is. It's really, really stupid.
How stupid is it?
Today.
It's stupid in Scotland today because now you're at the point, and this part's not stupid. Hearts is going to the courts because, I mean, you had the vote to stop the season, all that, the whole voting thing. Oh, we don't know where the vote is. Let's go ahead and announce the results. Oh, wait a minute. Dundee FC says they realize that their vote wasn't counted, and they say, well, we're going to hold our vote, and we're going to put it up for bid, basically. And we never heard what they exactly got. Maybe a bunch of Outback gift certificates. I don't know. Maybe. It's possible. But one of the things Dundee kept talking about was, no, we're holding up our vote because we want to fight for reconstruction in the league. We need to do this differently. Well, no, they didn't. Nobody ever did. There was no movement for that because they offered about 27 different proposals, everything from 3 divisions. I don't know if a 2-division format was ever truly proposed, but it was discussed. 3 divisions with different numbers in each one, more teams coming up from the non-league, Rangers and Celtic putting in U23 teams into the bottom league, and they couldn't get promoted past the 2nd division. All kinds of different solutions. None of them got any movement going on. No real consensus ever happened. So now they're just going to go do what they do. And Hearts is like, well, this is bogus. We have tried, and we have tried, and we have tried, and we've even brought somebody to the table who is pumping in millions and millions of dollars to support all the teams across the league. We brought them to the table. That's our guy. Still nobody wants to listen to Hearts. So Hearts says, all right, well, it's time to go to the courts because, one, you're relegating us, and we didn't get to finish the season. They might have been relegated anyway. They were bad. Bad team. That has nothing to do with this. They didn't get to finish the season, and now you're relegating them into a competition that's only going to play 27 games next year because the Scottish Championship doesn't want to start in September and play a bunch of games behind closed doors. They're going to start in October. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So now lose a quarter of your gate out of the blocks.
Yeah, it's a bunch of... Well, you're going to lose money. I mean, you're going to lose sponsorship revenue. You're going to lose all kinds of things. It's not about the gate, because if they played games in September, you'd miss the gate anyway, potentially. It's just the fact you're playing less games.
Yeah.
So if you are selling a kit sponsorship, you can't sell it for as much. There's fewer games that kit will be worn in.
Yep.
You know, it's just the basics. If a game's on TV, at least it's on TV, you can sell the signboards. Well, you go sell the signboards for the same amount. Somebody's going to come back and say, well, wait a minute, you're only playing 13 home games. We bought it for that amount for 17 home games or 19 home games last year. So, no, you're not getting that money. So Hearts is suing. And will they get it? I don't think they'll get put back into the first division, although the French courts, and that's what a lot of people are pointing at, said that you didn't have to just relegate based on something in a rule, and in France that was expiring at the end of June anyway. I don't know what the deal is in Scotland, but maybe they don't get that. Maybe they don't get a stoppage of the league starting. Maybe they don't get any of that, but I think they get money. I think they're going to find some money from this from somewhere, and the SPFL doesn't have any money. It's just no ability to work together. And yeah, it's a mess. And that's the thing, is you look at the leagues where people are not working together. Major League Baseball, Scotland, Australia for the most part, although now they're being held up by their TV partner. France, huge issue. Those are the ones that are struggling right now. The leagues that are finding ways to work together. Germany got back faster than anybody. Italy has found a way back. And Italy never works together, and they've found a way to do this.
Yeah.
Spain, you've had a strong leader in Javier Tebas who has just pushed and pushed and pushed it forward and got it done. England, you've had some fits and starts, but it's pretty coherent the way they've done. I mean, it's okay. It's not perfect. None of it's perfect right now. MLS found a way to get back. NWSL found a way to get back. It's you have to figure this out and find something new. I mean, now we're getting to a point in two countries that you're going to see some really weird things happen next that we have not seen up to this point. Brazil and Iran. Iran, in the Tehran Times, has a report that the Federation, the FA in Iran, is warning teams who have threatened to withdraw from the league not to do it. 7 teams say that the league should not restart on June 24th, and they're threatening to withdraw from the league. They don't think June 24th is late enough. They don't think they're ready for it yet. I don't know if we truly know the situation with coronavirus in Iran, and I don't know how the league has tried to come back to play. But you've got a considerable number of teams who don't want to come back yet. Brazil's even more madness. So Brazil, remember, you have state leagues on top of the national league. And in Brazil, the Carioca Championship, the state championship of Rio, an arbitrator last night said that it could start back Thursday. They had played 3 rounds before the outbreak. The problem is you've got clubs at a variety of situations in Brazil. Flamengo, remember, they were the ones who were busted for training when they weren't supposed to be training. They were all happy about the announcement. Vasco da Gama, who had 16 positive tests when they came back, I don't know where those numbers are now. I would hope that they're much better than that. They've been training in full. They were both pushing to get games back. Botafogo and Fluminense are arguing that games shouldn't start until July. Fluminense had not even completed their COVID-19 testing yet. They haven't resumed full training. Botafogo saying they're not going to play and they're going to go to the courts. You've got some teams that started training in late May. You've got other teams that haven't started training yet at all, even individual training. It's all over the place. And they're trying to say that, yeah, games can start back Thursday. It's madness. And Rio is not exactly handling the coronavirus outbreak very well. And as we're seeing with these situations, it's not the standard of testing and protocols that are in place in other leagues. That can mitigate whatever spread is going on in the community if it's done right. In Brazil, that part's not being done right. That part's not consistent. So, I don't know. I think Rio's the first one that's talking about coming back with their state championship, but I do not know where that's going to go. Because you're talking about huge clubs here. It's not, like the big clubs want something and the little clubs don't. This is Flamengo and Vasco on one side and Botafogo and Fluminense on the other. Those are all heavyweights. And I don't know how this ends. Are you going to have games on Thursday for some teams and other teams haven't even done their testing yet, haven't even started training yet? I mean, what in the world?
Should I just go ahead and say that nothing would surprise me?
No, nothing would be surprising in Brazil. I mean, that's typical for Brazil. It's, honestly not a surprise that you're getting crazy things happening during the coronavirus outbreak, but it's why the Brazilian league and it's why everything is so inconsistent in general in Brazilian football. The leadership is horrendous. I mean, to get to this point, it's just completely and utterly horrendous.
We do have more thoughts on Twitters, and I know that there's more stuff on the rundown this morning. Would you like for me to thank somebody about being a part of the network before we proceed, sir?
I think that's a good idea. Hit it.
Appolinsky and Associates. Good morning.
That's always been playing in the background. You just haven't heard it, and that's why I normally did that, because you get distracted.
All right. Appolinsky and Associates, LLC. Best trial attorneys in the business, ranked top 100 legal elite. Georgia Trend magazine for their work in wrongful death and serious injury cases. You can reach out to them a couple different ways. Website, aa-legal.com. Down low right-hand corner, pop-up window, live chat, 24/7, 365 at aa-legal.com. You can also give them a buzz at 404-377-9191 to get a free consultation, or you can shoot Steve Apolinski an email, steve at aa-legal.com. 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments in wrongful death and serious injury cases in Georgia and Alabama. aa-legal.com.
I'm going to go back to playing it where you can't hear it. Man.
Doing it in rhythm and in time with the music.
It's so bad.
That's so awesome.
It's so bad.
Dude, slow down. Check yourself. Stop the insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Rancho Cucamonga, San Isidro, Inland Empire. React to me.
Did only California people listen to Jim Rome?
That was a running homage to Hacksaw Lee Hamilton, who was another talk show host on the Mighty Extra. And all he would do when he would call for open phones, he would name Southern California cities. And so then Rome took that as an homage to Hacksaw, and he would do the same thing. Greenville, Atlanta, Chattanooga. React to me. What is on your mind? Is this thing on?
No, we're not doing this. We're not doing that. Good news out of Greenville, South Carolina. The Greenville Triumph virtually set a new attendance record for a match that was not a traditional match. 4,014 tickets were sold to benefit local COVID-19 relief through the United Way of Greenville County. That equates to over $40,000. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff for everybody who contributed to that. Awesome stuff for the United Way of Greenville County, and very cool for the Triumph to put all that together. Also in USL League One, you have South Georgia Tormenta's fundraiser for the Bullock County NAACP ending tonight. I retweeted the link from Tormenta_FC. Donate link is there. It's a really good cause that Tormenta is working with locally. This is what I love that you're seeing with smaller teams, is they're very localized in groups that they're working with to support. These are organizations that don't normally get this kind of push. And for Greenville Triumph, for South Georgia Tormenta to be leading the way in that, it's awesome. It shows you the power of smaller clubs. Because it's one thing for an Atlanta United, with the reach that they have and the pull that they have, they can have a big influence on big organizations and big things. For an organization in Statesboro to do this for an organization that doesn't get that type of, I think, attention. The United Way of Greenville County doesn't get the same attention that the United Way of Metro Atlanta gets. For the soccer organization to raise over $40,000 for them for what's going on in Statesboro, it's awesome. And that's why small clubs are so important. It's also why it's so important to find a way back to the field, like we talked about with Marcus Rashford. When you are playing, when you can get back on the field, your voice is louder. You have a bigger platform. You have more opportunities to get things done. So I'm excited to see where these things can go, but it's been very cool to see the clubs in our region really work hard to benefit their local communities right now.
And one other thing that Tormenta is doing, they have paired up with the Sack Company, and they are still doing their charity T-shirt sale, which helps feed Statesboro locals in need of a free meal. If you pick up one of their game day T-shirts, and you can call the Clubhouse restaurant in Statesboro and order one, and they can ship it to you. Order one of those opening game T-shirts. It's $20. It gives a meal to two individuals, in addition for you getting the T-shirt from Tormenta and the Sack Company. So if that's something that's also up your alley to help out, that's what they're doing in that part of the state as well.
All right, let's get caught up on the decision that UEFA is going to have to make tomorrow. They're having their meetings to figure out what the European competition looks like for the rest of this season and for next season. Dale Johnson over at ESPN, he's at Dale Johnson ESPN, has a really good breakdown on what's at stake in these meetings tomorrow. So you got the rest of the Champions League, the rest of Europa League for 2019-2020, and you got to decide the format. It seems that Lisbon will host the quarterfinals, semifinals, and final. Final Sunday, August 23rd. Europa League final is set to be in Germany August 21st. Don't know about how the competition looks before that. The round of 16 in both competitions. I think you have a few matches that have not started in the round of 16. You have others that have started and are midway through. As Johnson points out, teams with a first leg advantage are not going to want to give that up. It's just like we've talked about with the CONCACAF Champions League. You know, Club America is not going to want to wipe that out and say, oh, yeah, we'll just play a one game and see who goes through with Club America and Atlanta United. No, they're going to fight to hold their lead. They should. That's going to be the same here. I think you almost just have to finish the round of 16 as it is. But, you know, some teams might not be able to host those games. Are you going to move those to Portugal? That's not fair to the team that had to play on the road in the first game and then doesn't get a home game in the second. Is there a way to be fair? I don't know. But that's going to be a huge issue. August 2nd, which is when they want to get started with some of this stuff, Serie A is still going to be in action. They have games scheduled that week. And there's 5 Italian teams still left in Europe. The FA Cup final is set for that weekend, which could feature 2 teams that are still alive in Europe. Johnson says if UEFA is to be ready to stage the Champions League and Europa League quarterfinals from August 10th onwards, which is what we've seen for the Champions League, you got to finish the round of 16. But you got 5 Italian teams that are going to be playing in league the weekend before. How are you going to find a way to play? Like, you just don't have the calendar to do it. That's the calendar part. Now let's get more complicated. Squad registrations. Lyon, PSG, Rangers, all in leagues that are done. All in leagues that are looking to start the 2020-2021 campaign in August, when UEFA is looking to finish the previous campaign. One example, already, Hertha Berlin have not allowed Lucas Toussaint to remain on loan at Lyon to complete the Champions League season. We've heard about the Timo Werner talk that he might go ahead and go to Chelsea and not stay with RB Leipzig to finish the current Champions League season. You've got a competitions committee that's discussing this. Johnson says, do not expect UEFA to allow new signings to be added to the Champions League and Europa League squads. The concession is that teams will likely be able to add to the squads with players who were already at the club last season but not in the Euro list, which is not a huge amount of players, and players who are probably not all that influential in your teams. It's probably going to be younger players who you didn't name to the European list. Every once in a while you'll see a veteran who doesn't get named to that, but these are going to be guys who you weren't counting on before, and you might be losing some players that you were counting on, and you can't add anybody to replace those players. Good times. It's just a mess. All right, now, that's this year. Next year, the 2020-2021 Champions League and Europa League. Qualifying usually takes a couple of months. Not this time. You're going to have to get it done in a couple of weeks because you're going to be starting it later than ever before. How are you going to figure that out? You're probably just going to have everybody who would have qualified anyway, because I don't think you're going to tell the winners of the league in the Faroe Islands or in Iceland or in Albania that, yeah, sorry, you can't be in anything. Sorry. We're just going to have to cut it down. Can't do that because welcome to the court system again. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to take those qualifying matchups that were typically home and away and put them down to single leg. How do you decide where to play it? Are you going to have to play everything at neutral sites? Are you going to have to go back to Lisbon, and does Portugal just get a whole bunch of games? Does Germany get a whole bunch of games? I don't know. And are they going to get games? You're going to have to bring in teams from the Faroe Islands and Albania to come in and play in Germany to qualify for the next stage of Champions League, and then do it again in a week, and then do it again in a week. And, oh, yeah, there's domestic competitions going on, and, UEFA asked leagues ranked 16 to 55. So your smaller countries in Europe. UEFA asked those leagues to complete by July 19th, July 20th, if possible. And the leagues that are ranked 1 to 15, because teams come into the qualifying a little bit later, they wanted them to finish by August 2nd. That's why Serie A is pushed all the way up to August 2nd. If those smaller leagues finish or declare champions or whatever earlier, that gives them a little more time to start qualifiers. But you're going straight into it. There's no off-season. You had your off-season during the coronavirus outbreak, essentially. You would finish, if you have to finish your league on July 20th, for example, you might be playing a next season European qualifier in 3-4 days. Because that's how you're at. 3 teams in leagues ranked below 15, so in that 16 to 55, are still in this season's Europa League. So they would be in, like Rangers, for example, and I don't know where they would fall into the qualifying, but let's take them as the example here. They might not have league matches because Scotland decided not to play. They might have Europa League 2019-2020 matches to play, and they might have qualifying for Europa League 2020-2021 to play as well, all at the same time, with different squads in some way. Johnson says there remains a desire to have a September international window, which takes more time away from these clubs trying to play these games. And if that stays in place, there's no way you can get 4 rounds of qualifying before October's international window, which is still in place right now. That's why these international windows are in the way as well. The Champions League proposed start is October 20th, October 21st. I don't know how you get the qualifying done to get there. Typically, where that starts, that would be match day 3 of the Champions League. So you're going to miss 2 match days from a traditional calendar. Can you make that work? Yeah. I mean, Johnson points it out. I think he's dead on. You push the final 2 group games that are usually played before the end of the calendar year, you push those to February, where the knockouts usually start, and you're going to have more round of 16 games play at the same time to condense everything to get it done. That's doable. That's fine. However, then there's issues with squad registration, because typically I think you can change your Champions League squad after the group stage. Well, your transfer window, as we've already heard from Italy, is going to be in January. You're still going to have group stage games in Champions League after that. So are you going to be able to make changes to your squad after that? Are they going to allow you to make changes to your squad while the group stage is still going on? And Europa League doesn't have any extra dates, because they pack so many teams into it to begin with. Oh, yeah. Then there's that other thing. Remember the Euro 2020 competition? Well, it's going to be in 2021. I don't know how you fit that into anything. You've still got playoffs to have with that to determine who all gets there. You've got the Nations League to worry about. There's no international dates available. There's just not any. I mean, this is how Johnson breaks it down right now. And this is Europe, remember. The weekends, or the international windows, 2020, September through November, was supposed to be Nations League. World Cup qualifying 2021, March through November, and the Nations League finals you got to squeeze in there. The World Cup qualifying playoffs were set to be March of 2022. June to September of 2022 was set to be the Nations League, and then the World Cup finals in November and December of 2022. Now you got to have a Euro 2020 playoff, which was supposed to be in March of this year ahead of the competition. Can you put it in March of next year ahead of the competition? You're going to have to cut something else out, and then World Cup qualifying was supposed to be there. You have a whole Euro 2020 competition. You've got to squeeze in there somewhere. I think Nations League has to go. There's just no way you can make that work. FIFA's been having conversations about World Cup qualifying, because remember, when you're talking about Champions League and Europa League, you're not just talking about European World Cup qualifying and windows. You got to talk about Asia. You got to talk about South America. You got to talk about Africa. You got to talk about CONCACAF. Asia has lost 6 match days of World Cup qualifying. They are not going to play in September. They're set to resume in October. They've got some international dates to work with, but if there's a push at the club level that we need some of these international dates back because we've got to play our competitions and get things done, then it gets really, really tricky. The next FIFA meeting is June 25th. That's going to be a key. The World Cup qualifying draw procedure was supposed to happen after other matches in Europe. Teams would have had an opportunity, for example, if they played in Euro 2020 and did well, they could have bumped up in the ranking. That might have got them a better draw. Right now, those teams that you're looking at, a Denmark, a Sweden, a Poland, a Wales, if they had played well at Euro 2020 or in Nations League games before this, they would have had the opportunity to get into the seeded group. And that obviously gives you a much better road to the World Cup. I don't know. It's a mess. I mean, you're dealing with logistics that there's no easy answers to, and there's so many different elements pulling at it. Club game, club domestic games, club international games. Don't even talk about the Club World Cup at this point. National team matches at the World Cup qualifying stage, at the Continental Championship stage, at any other continental competition stage. How all of that fits between now and World Cup 2020 through the end of 2022, I don't know how you make it work. I do not know how things work the way you're currently set up. You're going to have to drop some things and condense some things, and that's not going to be easy to pull off.
Nations League?
Well, yeah, that's an easy one for Europe, but that doesn't solve the problems for South America. That doesn't solve the problems for Champions League and Europa League qualifying. It doesn't solve everything. What that does is that gives you a little more room for World Cup qualifying and a little more room for the Euros, but it doesn't take away international windows. That's an easy fix, and it's a minimal fix. But those Nations League games are important for seeding and for other things because they affect your FIFA ranking. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh, yeah, we've only had this one time. We don't really care that much about it, so we'll just drop it. Because countries are going to want those games to be able to improve their FIFA ranking. That was the whole point of it. So I don't know. There's no easy answers. There's no, you can offer whatever suggestion you want. It's been considered. There's something that makes it complicated. That's just where you're at with this. So it's going to be very difficult. That FIFA meeting in 9 days is going to be intriguing because they're going to have to, I think, set a couple of things then, honestly, what the World Cup qualifying windows look like going forward. And that's going to have to be, in coordination with all the different continents, all their championships that they already have in play, and whatever windows you have, and whatever format you already have in place, and whether it's already started or not. You've got a lot of things to juggle there if you're FIFA. You also have to figure out if you're going to do anything specific about transfer windows, or if you're just going to leave it to each league and each country to sort out for themselves, or if you're going to create something. And in any other bigger picture items, like they've talked about with limiting spending or some kind of financial fair play globally or all that, are you going to be able to even get into that right now? Probably not. Just that calendar is going to be a long process to sort out. And that's what they have to focus on, because then that gives the leagues, I think, a little more guidance in what they can do going forward. And they have to know it, because you have to determine, for example, if you're going to have a Club World Cup in December and you're going to do it, well, CONCACAF's got to have a champion. You know, I mean, like the Copa Libertadores, you got to figure out how to get to a champion when you're probably not really going to have a group stage, because I don't know where you're going to play these games or how you're going to get them played. So, okay, if FIFA's going to move forward with a Club World Cup because they need the money, because they need the sponsorship revenue, then each continent has to figure out how they solve that problem. And that's going to take one thing away from other possible opportunities. I don't know. There's no easy way to fix it, but FIFA's got to find a way to fix it.
Because the other two things that I had in mind, and the other one that was popped up as you were discussing it, does the FIFA World Cup skip and go to 2021 and become a supersized World Cup next year? But then you introduce the idea of the revenue that FIFA needs from something like that.
Well, yeah, that's the key. Is FIFA needs that money to share it with organizations that don't have revenue right now. So, you know, it's the same thing for CONCACAF. It's the same thing at every level. These competitions have revenue attached to them. That's why you're trying to get them finished. If you just push it back, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, because then you're just pushing it back into another crowded year. So, I mean, that doesn't necessarily solve it either. I don't know. I don't know. That's why even Nations League, it's not easy to just say, just wipe it out. There's money attached to Nations League specifically, and if it's not there, what does that do for the Faroe Islands FA's budget? What does that do for Finland's budget? You know, what does that do for these countries that need that revenue? Because it's why you created the Nations League in the first place. You know, it was more games, but it was also more money. It was another competition that you went out and sold. Well, are you going to have to give money back? Can you give money back? Probably not. Can you find a way to keep the money and fulfill the competition? Maybe. I don't know how. But these are the questions. These are the things that the game's dealing with right now.
And the other one that was running through my head was that if you trim qualifying into just one leg, where's your home? Is it neutral site? All the logistics questions that are attached to something like that.
It'd have to be neutral site, because you can't tell a team like yeah, you would have played home and away, but we don't have time to do that, so you don't get to play at home.
Right.
You're not going to do that. It'd have to be a neutral site. So then you've got to manage that, because it's not the team sorting out those games and hosting those games. You've got to host those games.
Mm-hmm.
So UEFA, in this case, in those competitions, would have to go and book, like they're doing in Lisbon. They would have to go book these venues. They would have to go book the hotels. They would have to set everything up, and that's another expenditure. And can you deal with that? But you can't kick these teams out of the competition that they played last season to earn. So there's just not an easy solution to any of it. And anybody who tries to tell you that there is wrong.
We have other stuff on Twitter as well from this morning.
What do we have on the Twitters?
Chris Ashley, using the hashtag A Whole New World Cup, says, with right at 3 weeks until the hashtag MLS is back tournament, and he says parenthetically, I still hate that name, when do we think we'll get news on the schedule?
Who knows? Not anytime soon, because you want to see if you're going to be able to have games with fans in the stands, and you want to wait that out as long as possible. You would, I'm assuming, rather you finish the Orlando tournament, and if it's looking, and look, you know, Don Garber and his people are talking to the clubs are talking to their local governments. I'm sure that Don Garber is talking to the federal government as well as probably state governments about what this is going to look like in September, in October. He's probably talking to college commissioners. He's probably talking to the NFL and saying, well, what are you guys going to do? Because if they go forward, then MLS is going to go forward. If they hold back, MLS is not going to go step past what major college football and what the NFL are going to do in terms of fans in the stands. So you've got a lot of things to measure. And if MLS could wait after the Orlando tournament and resume in mid-September and have every guarantee that if you start in mid-September, you can play whatever number of games you can play, and you'd have fans in the stands, which would mean some revenue, even if it's minimal, you're going to do that. And you'll wait and maybe play a couple more midweek games to make up for those games. If it doesn't look likely, then maybe you announce it a little bit sooner and you come back a little bit sooner. You come back the last week of August, for example. But it's so much of it revolves around fans in the stands. And you want to wait to make the decision about your schedule to maximize how many fans you can have in the buildings. And right now, we just don't know. There's just no way to know. It's a total guessing game right now. So I don't think they want to commit themselves to games behind closed doors unless they have to. And they're trying to wait it out. So I don't think we'll hear anything about the rest of the schedule until maybe even towards the end of this tournament, maybe late July. And I'm okay with that. Now, I think the Orlando schedule, I honestly thought we would have had it by now. I think it'll be any time now. It's sorting out the TV dates, I'm assuming, and the TV time and placement, which is a little bit of juggling between Univision, Fox, ESPN, and all the assorted networks, 2DNA, FS1, FS2, ESPN, ESPN2, maybe ABC, maybe Big Fox. So you got a lot of things to sort out there, and that's what I'm assuming the holdup is. You want to maximize, now that you have the draw, and again, this is why I think the black helicopters about the draw were ridiculous, because if it was already prearranged, you would have prearranged the TV schedule too, and you would have announced everything. Now you know what some of these big games can be, and you want to place them in front of as many eyeballs as possible. So you want to make sure that the LAFC, LA Galaxy game has as many eyeballs as possible on the West Coast. You want to make sure that Atlanta and Red Bulls, which is a game you've put in national windows before, has as many eyeballs as you can. You want to maximize it. So that's probably where you're at now. I think you'll get that schedule any day now. Any day it'll happen.
Joey Logan, into the conversation we had about youth soccer that you were having in hour number one. He says, you're absolutely spot on with youth soccer. I charged each player $250 for the fall select season, 2 full uniforms, a jacket, a bag, and 1 preseason tournament. And we traveled to Tifton, Carrollton, and LJ twice. I always offered rides and brought Gatorade and snacks.
Man, I wish I could have had players who could have paid $250 a season. We at Soccer in the Streets had to get creative with it. That's why we did a lot of fundraising, for one. But yeah, we did not have those resources, and those are not heavy resources when you compare to like Zlatan's kids paying $3,500 to get in the door at some club. But I would hope that they're offering things to try to sell you on paying that much money. We didn't lie to you. We didn't lie about how much we were offering to you. This was what we could do to get a season done. But you can do these things for, I think, effective pricing. But as we've said with all of this, I think everybody, jumps on the pay-to-play bandwagon and is like, this is terrible, it's terrible. Well, if you got rid of it, who's paying the coaches? Who's paying the administrators? Who's paying the referees? Who's paying to maintain the fields? Who's paying for the coaching education that is needed? Who's paying for the referee development that's needed at a club? Who's paying for those things? And if you're not doing those things, well, then the product isn't as good. And then you're back to where you were decades and decades ago, and it's all volunteer, and it's completely haphazard. I was really lucky as a kid at the YMCA in Clayton County that I was matched up with a coach who was a young guy and had played growing up, and that was not very easy to find in 1986. And I think he played in college, if I remember right, but he was just passionate about the game. If I had gotten a random dad who didn't know anything about the game, I might not be here today doing this. That was just a complete luck thing. for me. I got lucky that I got paired up with a coach who was great. You didn't have coaching certifications like you do now. You didn't have all the courses like you do now. He went out and tried to learn as much as he could because he was passionate about it. Served me well. It helped me. It helped other kids that were on my team. So we were lucky. But that's why clubs should be charging amounts for registration. Now, has it gotten a little out of whack? Yeah, there's no way around that. But there's still money needed to operate a youth club at the high level that you're expecting it to be run. And you have to find a way to do it. That was always our struggle at Soccer in the Streets because, at its heart, Soccer in the Streets is not an organization that's trying to build elite youth teams and develop professional players. Can it happen? Yeah, absolutely. It can happen anywhere. But is that the goal? Well, no. But how do you find that middle ground? And how do you find that level that's appropriate for the kids you have? How do you find that level that is a motivator for kids to try to reach towards? How do you pay for that? Because, like Joey says, you're dealing with gas money, you're dealing with food money, you're dealing with equipment, you're dealing with all kinds of different things no matter what level you're at. And it's a challenge. And you've got to find a way to make it work. And I think youth clubs need to be more intentional about the youth development side. And when I say youth development, I'm not just talking about soccer player development. I'm talking about youth development. They need to be more intentional about that than just making as much money as they possibly can and only serving the elite of the elite and only trying to sell to the elite of the elite in terms of, this is going to be your experience. Yes, I know you're on the 7th team, but you're going to pay thousands and thousands of dollars because at this club you could be on the first team. No, you're not going to be on the first team. Don't lie to the kids and charge them like they're a first-team player when they're on the 7th team. There's things like that that really bother me about it. You've got to find a way forward with this. And the youth game's in a weird spot because you're going to have youth clubs that don't survive this. There's just no way. You're going to have parents who can't afford to pay for their kids to play at an elite youth club. So is there going to be an opportunity for them to play at a cheaper club? Hopefully. Because what we don't want to see in the game is those parents just don't have their kids play because they can't afford it.
Right.
I don't know what the solution is. U.S. Youth Soccer has announced dates and locations for their new National League Showcase Series. Remember, with the Development Academy going away, now it's kind of fallen back away from the federation to organizations like U.S. Youth, like U.S. Club, like other conglomerates that clubs have formed to have their elite level play. U.S. Youth has announced that their first National League Showcase Series is set for late October in Greensboro, North Carolina. U.S. Soccer's recommendation, U.S. Youth Soccer is not the official arm of the U.S. Soccer Federation. I want to make that clear. It is a separate entity that's a member of the U.S. Soccer Federation, but it's not the only United States youth soccer organization out there. The Federation's recommendations for return to play in Phase 3 include no multi-day youth tournaments that require overnight stays in different regions. In an interview with the Aspen Institute's Project Play, U.S. Soccer's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. George Chiampas, said, quote, "If for the next 8 to 12 months this is what we have to do, travel for a day and come back, with no multi-day tournaments so kids and parents don't die, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to follow this." Doctor, you maybe could have used some different phrasing in that, but okay.
Yeah.
U.S. Youth Soccer CEO Skip Gilbert, remember, separate organization from the Federation, Skip Gilbert told Project Play that U.S. Soccer's recommendations are a, quote, thoughtful, logical projection of return to play, but his organization is not taking the same position on traveling to overnight tournaments, citing different rates of COVID-19 cases in different communities, which is not entirely wrong. I'm not a fan of multi-day youth tournaments to begin with because I don't think it promotes good soccer. That's me. I don't like these ideas of playing 5 games in 3 days and expecting kids to play quality soccer in game 4. It's impossible. They're gassed. You can't do that. Your body can't do that. Why do you have those tournaments like that? Cash. Straight cash. Because, again, that money goes back into clubs. Does it go to pay exorbitant salaries for some? Yeah, it does. Does it go to coaching education? It should. It better. Does it go to equipment? Yeah, it should. It better. Does it go to scholarships for kids who can't afford to play at that club? It better. It does in many cases. But this is what you're going to see. U.S. Soccer Federation has set recommendations, but U.S. Youth is going to have their showcase series in Greensboro in October and have parents and families stay overnight. Now, I don't know about Dr. Chiampas's quote of with no multi-day tournaments so kids and parents don't die. I don't know if that's really the way to put this. That one bugs me. I don't know about that. I don't know about putting it out that way, and also I don't know how accurate that is, because you're talking about the traveling and staying in a hotel overnight. As we've said, like the idea of staying in a hotel overnight, I think we've understood now that hotels are cleaning more than they ever did.
Yep.
You're able to not have this concern about touching a counter that somebody previously touched and catching coronavirus. That's not how it spreads. So
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that quote's an older quote. I don't know. I'm gonna go with that. This was all from Soccer America talking about the U.S. Youth announcement. Youth clubs are going to have concerns during all of this, and it's going to be different for 9-year-olds than it is for 18-year-olds. As we saw, a high school program down in South Georgia had to stop all their activities because they had positive tests. And high school organizations are not doing testing on the way in to come back, and they're not doing regular testing throughout. Major college football programs that have lots of money, millions and millions of dollars. SMU is not doing testing after the initial round of testing. University of Houston didn't do testing, period, coming in. Youth organizations don't have the money to worry about testing. It's not going to happen. Your local youth club is not going to mandate testing or not provide testing for kids to come back. Are the kids at risk? Yes, they are. Are they at the same risk as a 70-year-old coach? No, they're not. The 70-year-old coach is at more risk. Can the kids spread the disease to the 70-year-old coach? Yes. These are all concerns, and youth sports are not going to have the testing that we've talked about day after day after day and week after week after week during this that the Bundesliga has had, that the Premier League has, that MLS has. They're not. So how do they function in this environment? I don't know the answer, to be honest. I don't know the answer how schools function. I don't know the answer how youth sports functions, because there's no way to guarantee the testing element. I think if you're a coach at a club or a referee, or you're doing anything where you're interacting with the kids, you have to maintain social distancing. I think you just have to. You have to do anything you can with masks, with gloves. And in this case, because it's not as much you're worried about spreading it to the kids, you're worried about catching it from the kids, you're going to have to go with a face shield. Or you're going to have to think about PPE and all these kinds of things. Because there's no guarantee for you that the kids are not positive and spreading the disease. There's no way to guarantee that. That's the difference with the level of testing. You can do things differently if you are doing the level of testing that organizations are doing in pro sports and what college should be doing. If you don't have that, then you have to go back to the social distancing questions. But the kids are at risk because they're not going to do things differently with this. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to keep John connected, as we're finding out as well. I think he might be back, or he might be frozen. John, are you there? I think I bored John and his connection crapped out. Hopefully, you are still with us on Twitch. It's not dropped because John dropped. I'm going to hope that he comes back. I'm going to leave it like this so I don't lose you guys. Yes, Chris Ashley, he is smiling, and good. I'm glad you guys are still there. So I don't want to mess with it. I'm not going to disconnect and reconnect to try to get John back. The challenges of fun stuff here. Bart, the problem is it would drop everything if I just started adding people to the call. And I'm also afraid about adding some of you guys to the call. And there we just lost it. Give me one quick second as I try to regain it on Twitch. For those of you listening, I apologize. Let's see if we can do this. All right. You guys get to hear all the fun phone stuff. Why do you always drop at like 10:45?
I don't know.
Why do you sound like Darth Vader right now?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm on my phone as opposed to
and you look like a South Park character or something.
I do?
Yes, because
Interesting.
You look like you're operating from a phone in 1999, one of those really bad brick phones, like one of the first ones that had a camera on it. That's what you look like
awesome.
right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's
interesting.
It's the first Nokia camera phone, according to Chris Ashley. That's what you're operating right now.
There you go.
I
had no idea.
Why did you drop? Did somebody call you?
No, the internet connection just decided to disappear on me.
We're going to have to take up a collection for better internet for John Nelson, so this doesn't happen on a regular basis.
For real.
I apologize to all of you listening, and I apologize to all of you watching, and I apologize to all of you who are watching later on with our friends at Barn Burner. Blame John. That's all I can say. At OSG Nelson. Yeah. You want to yell at him? Yell at him.
And now the internet's back. All right, good to know.
Oh, boy. All right, let's finish off any other news. We mentioned Zlatan. Zlatan is in some trouble because he was back in Sweden. The Swedish league is back, and he is a part owner at Hammarby, and he took the opportunity to watch the game. That's great. Went into the dressing room after the final whistle. Hey, that's not what the protocol is supposed to allow. Only players and technical staff are allowed to enter the changing rooms. So now the Swedish FA could open an investigation into his conduct, and that would just be hilarious. So go Swedish awesome. FA. Go ask some questions to Mr. Ibrahimovic. Scotland. Good news on the Scottish front today. No, I'm not even going to do it because you might break it. The BBC reports that, remember our friend James Anderson, who has donated tons and tons of money to support the game in Scotland. Well, he's donated some more, £250,000 to women's football in Scotland. This is through the Scottish Football Partnership Trust. It's described as the single biggest investment in the women's game in Scotland. There's, I guess, some kind of a matching component. Could go up to £312,500 to the women's game. Initially, the first phase will be distributed by the Trust to Scottish Women's Premier League First Division and Second Division clubs, as well as the Scottish women's game as a whole, to sustain non-playing staff and key club infrastructure. Benefits will also filter down to other SWF member clubs, including those at the grassroots level. James Clydesdale, he's the chair of the Scottish Football Partnership Trust. He said, "The women's game has been making great progress in the last 5 years, and we don't want to see this momentum lost due to the COVID crisis." Scotland was in their first World Cup in 2019, and yeah, you're starting to see more on the club side in the women's game, which is really cool, and this is going to be critical to supporting that. So James Anderson is doing a lot of good things for the game in Scotland, and I don't think he's going to stop anytime soon, so that's a big help. A couple news and notes out of England. This is from Tom Bassam at Sports Pro. Bournemouth was in an interesting spot. Their advertising for the front of the shirt was set to end now. M88, the Asian bookmaker. Well, they're not going to renew that with them. There's some issues with them in a second we'll get to. But they do have a shirt sponsor for the rest of the season because they were going to play without one. Vitality will be on the front of the shirt for the rest of this season, 9 games. They've been the naming rights sponsor for the stadium since 2015. They get the branding on the team's home and away shirts for the final games of the Premier League season. The brand also gains additional match day commercial inventory, including LED advertising, interview backdrop space, which it's going to use to thank and pay tribute to NHS staff and key workers. This thing with Bournemouth, the M88 deal expired on May 31st. They didn't want to extend it for the rest of the season. The UK Gambling Commission opened an investigation into M88, so that's one reason why. However, Mansion Bet will remain as the club's sleeve sponsor, at least till the end of this current season. Over at Norwich, they had a player test positive for coronavirus last week. He has since returned a negative sample. Stuart Webber said. He's the sporting director. The player is undertaking a 7-day period of self-isolation. Rules him out of the game this Friday against Southampton. Norwich did their own private test. That's why he's got a negative sample back already. They did their own private test. That came back negative. Webber said, luckily, the player in question is completely fine, 100%. There's nothing wrong with him. I guess we'll find out who it is once we see who's not in the squad for Friday. Weber spoke to the Beautiful Game podcast. He said he's actually done an independent test with our doctor, which has come back negative, which is confusing. So now he's got to have a third test to see if that comes back negative and to check if he's got antibodies, which could prove that he has had it in the past but doesn't have it now. I don't know if the antibody test is necessarily going to give you that. There's been a lot of questions about how many antibodies you have and how that works. The main thing is that he's healthy and the rest of the group are healthy, but it's a good wake-up call. We've done all of these measures, and one of us could still get it. That's quite scary, really. And it is. It's you're doing a ton of testing. You're doing all these protocols, but as some managers have said, like, look, you can't stop a player from putting gas in the car. You can't stop a player from running to the grocery store. You can't have a player just completely locked down in their house, as we're seeing Bill Hamid really pushing back hard on the lockdown measures in Orlando. I mean, it's not going to be possible to do completely, even in a situation like that. I think there's going to have to be some give back on it. I don't know what that ends up being. I don't know if it's more events at the resort. I don't know. I don't know what you do with MLS in that situation. But this is the wake-up call. I mean, you do everything right, you can still have a positive test pop up. The Bournemouth player who went to the shop, he thought, and that's where he called
Aaron Ramsdale, yeah.
These things are going to happen. So it's just very difficult to completely eradicate. Keep an eye tonight in Spain on Villarreal and Mallorca. Mallorca could have a 15-year-old in the squad. He traveled as part of the first-team squad, Luca Romero. He is nicknamed the Mexican Messi, but he's going to represent Argentina, at least for now. Romero will become La Liga's youngest ever player if he plays tonight. So that gives you a little bit of a storyline with that one. And in Philadelphia, we mentioned the Kevin Durant purchase of the Philadelphia Union, 5%. It values the club at over $300 million, which is significant. A huge element of this is the work that the Union do in the community, and they are one of the best clubs in this country in their community work. Durant gets a marketing partnership with 35 Ventures. That's his firm operated by him and Rich Kleeman, his business partner, and an agreement to work on community outreach with the Kevin Durant Charity Foundation. Durant said in a statement, "My team and I connected instantly with the Union coaching staff and leadership, as well as the team's story. Off the pitch, I'm looking forward to working in the Chester and Philadelphia communities and making an impact in the same way that the KDCF has been able to in my hometown of Prince George's County." That's a key element here because Durant, using his power as a professional athlete, he's done a lot with his foundation. That was the selling point on the union because they have done really good work with their foundation. They've been heavily involved in the community, and even through their academy, they include what some clubs would put in a community outreach program. The union have it as part of their academy as well. It's a significant element to this, and it's one that won't get talked about as much. Everybody's going to look at the valuations. Everybody's going to look at the money that's changing hands, and those are important elements. I don't know if Philadelphia would have been as appealing to Kevin Durant if you hadn't had a club with a focus on community development, because that is an important thing to him, as he already has a foundation, and he didn't want to go to a club that doesn't take it seriously. Philadelphia does, so they'll be able to work together to do really good things, not just in Philadelphia, but in Chester, which has been an element that the union have needed to do a little bit better with since they built the stadium there. There's been a lot of questions about what things look like specifically in Chester, and if that's where they do some focus to grow that part of it, that'd be huge. That'd be a really big impact out of this. So another key element on top of the money, on top of the valuation, and on top of just the name power, getting Kevin Durant involved in the league, you're going to have another person involved who takes community development very seriously.
Got a couple things on Twitter to mop up before we go.
What do we have?
Turner Kirby, back in our college discussion, he says, hearing us talk about Houston's issues, University of Houston's issues with COVID cases, makes him wonder how can a small D2, shout out to the Peach Belt Conference, provide their schools with some supplies needed to safely get back, and these Power 5 schools haven't done something like that.
Ignorance out of the Power 5 schools, being cheap out of the Power 5 schools. Houston not testing players on the way back is an embarrassment. SMU saying that they don't have a plan to test, and they don't have a plan if somebody tests positive. There's no plan. Embarrassing. Go do a Google search. Bundesliga return to play protocol. This goes out to you, whoever your athletic director is at SMU, whoever your athletic director is at Houston, and any other one who doesn't have a plan. Hey, SEC, I'm talking to you. Go do a Google search. La Liga's was published. The Guardian went through the whole thing and published it. Go get those and look at how important testing is in them. Look at how important the policy is if a player tests positive and what you do if a player tests positive. Go look at how you have to have all this spelled out. Go look at that, and then, hey, maybe SMU. Maybe you look in the mirror why you don't have a plan, but you're asking these kids to sign a waiver that protects you from any legal liability.
Yeah.
I wonder why that's in place. Because you're cheap. Ross County, a Scottish Premiership club, bought a testing machine. Ross County. And SMU can't figure out how to test after one round of tests when players come back. Houston couldn't even do that much. Really? The Peach Belt Conference is taking this seriously. It's insane that you've got small organizations buying testing machines, buying testing equipment, taking testing seriously, and you have multi-million-dollar athletic departments like Houston and SMU and Ohio State. And I don't know Ohio State's testing procedures. I don't know that part, so I'm going to be careful with how much shade I throw at them. SMU is an absolute embarrassment.
Yep.
To not only come out and say, we're not doing testing after they come back to campus, we're testing on the way back in, and then we don't know what we're going to do if somebody tests positive, to come out and have that in the story that is also talking about you asking your athletes to sign a waiver removing you from all legal liability. You know, if the NCAA had any cojones, they would actually do something about that.
Yeah.
But, nah. They don't care either. It's an embarrassment, and whoever the coach, whoever the athletic director is, whoever those people are who have talked to a parent and told them, we're going to take care of your son or daughter if you come to our school, you lied to them. You lied to them, and it is the saddest thing I've heard of in major American sports. It is pathetic. And it's not being talked about because I don't think people understand it, because they're not paying attention to all of the dramatic protocols that European leagues and other leagues around the world. New Zealand doesn't have issues with coronavirus right now. They haven't had a positive test in the country in a long time. They're still following some protocols, even with fans in the stands. There are return-to-play protocols that have been vetted, that have been successful, that are easily available. And major multi-million-dollar programs in this country are not doing anything about it. And, yeah, the waiver from SMU is terrible. It's an embarrassment to have that out there. The bigger embarrassment is that there is no plan to deal with coronavirus, just acting like it doesn't exist. Those days are gone. You can throw that back in the conspiracy theory crapper. It's real. So you have to deal with it. Do you want to play? Then have a plan to deal with it. If you don't, you're not going to be able to play. That's the problem, is this idea you want to play. You want to have fans in the stands. You want to make sure you make all your money. All that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to throw shade at you for that. I'm going to throw shade at you because you're not doing it in a thought-out way. You can't make the money that you're expecting to make if you don't have a plan to test, because last time I checked, American football is a contact sport, and it's not even soccer or basketball where players are not standing next to somebody for extended periods of time. Offensive linemen and defensive linemen are that issue, that fear, that the reason why you don't have players sitting next to each other on the bench for the whole game. Because if you're around somebody for 15 minutes, it is far more risky for you to catch this. So what about linemen who are there banging up against the same people over and over and over again? Come on. The game is maybe one of the more challenging ones to come back. And what are you doing in response? You're not doing anything. You're acting like it's not even a real issue. And it's an embarrassment. And any parent you promised that you would take care of their child, you lied. SMU, you lied to every parent that is in your program. You did. Houston, you did. Ohio State, I don't know what your testing procedure is. SEC, you hadn't said a word. You hadn't said a word. You came out with all this big hype. Yeah, we're coming back to campus. Yeah, we got a plan. Yeah, we're going to wait a week because, we want to give the schools time to get ready for it. But, yeah, we're coming back. Well, what happens if, there's a positive? Well, what are you going to do about testing? Well, we're going to test if somebody shows symptoms. Have you missed the last 3 months, guys? SEC. You're not hurting for money. The Peach Belt Conference is embarrassing you. The SEC should be out there first. If you're the leader in college football, you should be out there first with, this is our procedure. This is vetted through all of our medical departments and in conjunction with the state and federal governments and in conjunction with all these other leagues that have already come back. And this is what we're going to do. As the leader in the industry, this is what we're going to do. And nobody's doing this. And nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. College sports are running the risk of wrecking all this for other sports because people aren't going to pay attention. You're just going to see what happened at Houston. You're just going to see if SMU has an outbreak later because they're not going to test. You're just going to hear that and you're going to say, oh, you can't do sports. And that's not true. You can. NASCAR's shown you a way back for their sport. Golf is showing you a way back for their sport. Soccer is going to show you a way back for their sport. Other leagues around the world are showing you a way back. Because you don't follow it, you don't get to wreck it for the rest of the world. But people have to start talking about those protocols. The waiver was not the part that made me want to throw things when I read the article from Dallas yesterday. It's the fact that there is no plan to test outside of once when the people come back on campus. And that's just stupid. And I didn't think there were people that were that dumb or ignorant or blind running an organization like SMU Athletics, but maybe I was wrong. You're putting kids and you're putting coaches and you're putting people's lives at risk by just not doing the basics. Yeah, you're going to have to spend money on those tests. It's an expenditure. It's a big one. You want to do sports safely? That's the cost of doing it. Otherwise, don't play. That's what it's going to come down to. But to do it the way that you're trying to do it, and then on top of that, to ask players to sign a waiver that takes away your legal liability, criminal. Absolutely criminal.
Turner also, and this is probably going to end up being the lead for tomorrow, Turner also wanted thoughts on Kyrie Irving's comments about not wanting sports to return because it would be a distraction to what's going on.
Well, no, we talked about it earlier in broad strokes. I'm not Kyrie Irving. I can't speak for Kyrie Irving. I haven't lived Kyrie Irving's life, so I can't say he's wrong or right. Personally, my opinion is that coming back and playing games, you can use that platform to bring about whatever change, whatever spotlight you want to bring about in a more impactful way by playing than not playing. That's my opinion. But I haven't lived that life, so I can't say he's wrong. I think the NBA has been very upfront about not trying to stand in the way of their players making statements. And I don't think they're going to start now. And I don't think you would see a case where, yes, you come back and play, but yeah, don't say anything too loudly because we don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter, or we don't want to talk about racial inequalities. We don't want to talk about these things. No, I don't think the NBA would do that. I think you would have that platform to be able to use it to cast a light on these things. And I think it's more valuable that way. That's my opinion. I don't know. But I hope, as we're seeing in the soccer world, leagues and teams that are coming back, players are using that platform and nobody is standing in the way of it. And even FIFA has said, do not punish these players. And that's huge. And that's a very good thing. And I do think that's going to continue with the NWSL coming back first and then MLS. I think you're going to see players use this platform for good. And I hope that they do. And I hope the NBA figures out the direction they want to go. Because I think the NBA coming back would absolutely use this platform for good. And I think it'd be a very powerful thing. And I hope that they do. If they don't want to come back because they want to use their platforms for good, I hope that they do. But I think they can use it even more by coming back. That's just my opinion, though.
Michael Ruiz, are we going to talk about the absolute savagery that Atlanta United Twitter unleashed on Orlando's Twitter when they made a Father's Day post with googly eyes and laughter emojis?
Invite from Orlando City to get savagely ripped apart. So I'm sure it will continue, and I'm sure there'll be more on Sunday from Atlanta fans to Orlando. You know, it's just kind of obvious.
And then Chris Hutchison, when we were discussing Scotland, quoted Alice in Wonderland for us, and then he said, Luddites Unite, stand with John. I'm guessing because of my Star Trek communicator flip phone that I have here.
Yeah, pretty much. Anything else on Twitter?
Nathan Pugh says, I just pray that the soccer players know the difference between lowercase BLM and uppercase BLM.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it. That's it. We're caught up.
Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Soccer players are doing good things. I thought Alejandro Bedoya had some really good things to say on the ESPN Return to Play special last night. Everybody returning except for Major League Baseball. I guess, you know. Mm-hmm. I thought Crystal Dunn had some great things to say there as well, and I'm glad that they shoehorned her in after realizing that they forgot about the NWSL in that event. Which was a dramatically bad oversight from ESPN in their planning of that event. An insult. I mean, there's no way around it. Crystal Dunn was great, though, and I want to hear more from her. I hope the NWSL is very vocal going forward with everything. A couple things on Twitch. Kefsey lets us know that rapid testing is available. Went to Peachtree Immediate Care on North Decatur. Had to wait several hours in line, but rapid testing is available. I know in Georgia, testing has not been an issue in terms of accessibility for a while now. I don't know in Florida, but I'm assuming that was part of the whole plan of going to play this event in Florida, that testing would not be an issue. MLS has said they're going to test every other day for most of the stay down there, and that's critical. So that's a lot of tests. Shouldn't be a problem. Some states, that's not the case. Some areas, that's not the case. So that does have to be kept in mind. We're kind of lucky. Bart says, watching a lot of Danish and Swedish league matches, a lot of those stadiums have turf or hybrid surfaces. Why aren't they met with the same criticism MBS takes anytime it's mentioned as a great soccer stadium? Because they get it, because they understand. Weather's also a huge concern there, and they don't have a dome and indoor facility to play in, so grass isn't going to hold up very well. So they put these surfaces down because it holds up better, and then it creates a better game. I've said it for a long time about turf. Like, turf is not a world-class grass facility. If you have world-class, the best grass field, I'm always going to take that. But if you don't have a perfect grass field, turf is better. Great turf is better than bad grass. Great turf is better than good grass because it's consistent. It's 100% consistent. It needs to continue to improve. It needs to be more like grass. I think we're seeing that. I think the effects of turf on a match, if you compare games at Mercedes-Benz to games at BC Place, for example, night and day. You compare it to turf from 5 years ago. Absolutely night and day.
Yep.
Some people, Bart, you know this, and we all know it, and it drives you crazy. People just think what they want about being authentic, and they have an issue with turf because, well, it's not grass. Well, what if it does X, Y, and Z, and it plays like this, and it plays like that? Oh, no, it's not grass. So there's just no reason to even waste your time. It's just goofy. The Danish fans and the Swedish fans are not that uppity about it, luckily. And it's just needed there. Yeah. KFC also adds wear masks. It helps. And sports cannot ignore testing if they want to restart. You have to understand the need of all this. That's what we talked about with youth coaches. High school coaches are going to be in this as well. It's just, if the players are not being tested, then, well, they could be, with the virus, and they could be spreading the virus. Coaches, referees, other field administrators are going to have to be careful and take care of themselves. And if that means they have to conduct sessions with a face shield on to protect them and a mask on to protect spreading it to the players if they're not being tested, and gloves on because gloves protect you, mask protects other people, face shield protects you. If you've got to think about all that, well, if I was coaching, teenagers and there was no testing going on, yeah, I'd absolutely be thinking about that. Say what you want. I would absolutely be thinking about that because I couldn't control the environment I'm in. I don't love going to a crowded store right now because you can't control the environment you're in.
Yep.
It's real. You can poo-poo it. You can say, well, you might just get sick for a little while. It might not be a big deal. Well, you might not. And I don't want to know, and I don't want to spread it to anybody. So, yeah, we talk about it a lot because it's a big deal. And if college programs don't get it right, what's going to happen is you're going to have this huge issue in the SEC because they are ignorant about the way they're handling this. And then everybody's going to talk about, well, see, you can't do sports. And no, that's not the conversation. Every time you've had positive tests, people freaked out about Ezekiel Elliott testing positive. That's what's supposed to be happening right now. You identify it, you isolate it, you don't let it spread. You treat him, you keep him away from the group, you come back and you start practice. That's what's supposed to happen. That's not a sign that you shouldn't play. It's the opposite. The sign that Houston shouldn't play is that they're not doing any testing, because then they have no way to know. And what happens when that player that tested positive in the pre-testing situation and then comes into the program, they're good. What happens when you're not doing any testing and a player goes out to a party on campus or goes to the store or does all the basic things that we all do that you run a risk, and then comes back into the program and isn't being tested, and then it's one player, then it turns into 5, then it turns into 10, then it turns into 20, then it turns into the coaching staff, then it turns into the referees in the game, and then people are going to say you can't do sports. And that's not true. You can, but you have to do it with intelligence, you have to do it with care, and you have to do it with risk management. And if you don't do the testing, you cannot safely guarantee an environment that people aren't going to get sick in. You can't. So I have big concerns and questions about how high school sports and youth sports look right now with this. And they have to figure out how they want to handle it. It's not easy. It's one thing for the University of Georgia to do testing. It's another for a Division III or NAIA school to do testing. And it's a whole different thing for a small high school to do testing. And it's an even different thing for a small local community club to do testing. The price is the same. You know, it's $100 a pop, roughly. You know, it's going to be that if you are, you know, wanting to play at your local high school. It's going to be that if you're wanting to play for the Dallas Cowboys. That's just real. So it stinks, and I'm really worried about these college programs because they don't seem to be taking this seriously, and they're not being held accountable. So we will see where it goes. We'll keep you posted on everything in MLS and NWSL with their return to play. More teams every day are returning to full training in MLS. That means they're doing testing coming in. We've had a DC United player test positive. Don't know who it was. Again, that's what's supposed to be happening. You do the testing so that doesn't spread. That's what's supposed to happen. That's good. That's not a bad sign, as some people tried to tell you yesterday. That's nothing bad. That is good. You treat them, you keep them away from spreading it to the group, you move forward. That's where we're at with this. That's reality. Like it or not, that's reality. We'll keep you posted on all that. We'll keep you posted on everything as we hope to get a schedule for MLS in Orlando very soon. We're going to get you ready for NWSL as well, which is starting on June 27th. And we're going to keep you posted on everything going on around the world. You've got games in Spain today. You've got games in Germany today. England is back on the field tomorrow, along with the Coppa Italia final tomorrow, which should be a really good match. I'm looking forward to Napoli and Juventus. All kinds of stuff. We'll be back in the morning. Thanks for hanging out with us. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.